Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the attic. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from an anonymous caller. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Hi, Lloyd. I'm calling from the United States, Arizona, more specifically. Well, Arizona, at least for now. I'm a 25-year-old PMO MS, and I wanted to preempt my question with a thank you, like a genuine thank you. I woke up 5, 6 years ago, and it started with the ARC, and then it turned to the XJW subreddit, and then I started looking at more outside sources, JW Facts, and then your channel. And it was always, and it has to this day, remained a place where I can it's kind of like a comfort for me. And it's helped me because I've woken up a few people also, a few of my friends, and your channel has always been a big help with that. The way you present things, you aren't the typical angry apostate that the witnesses are looking to create that or paint that image of. And it's always been a big help, man. So just genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything you do. There are a bunch of lurkers, I can assure you, that look at your channel and they don't get the chance to comment and let you know that it does make a difference, but it does make a difference. So get into my question. I wanted your professional opinion, and I guess we can call it professional. You've been doing this for a while, reporting on Watchtower and what they do. I just wanted your genuine opinion on what you think is the governing body's tactic moving forward. And by that, I mean not really a Jonestown scenario, of course, that's extreme, but they're undeniably at a crossroads. I can even see it here locally. Normally I'd look at the subreddit and I'd see things like, oh, this and this and this is happening. I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but that's not local. I don't see any hint of that here, any hint of that slowing. Always been part of a very big congregation. But lately, it's been way more noticeable. People are flaking on assignments. People aren't showing up. People aren't there at the meetings. It's pretty much like what the discussion forums are saying. It's like a 70-30 split, 70% over Zoom, cameras off all the time, 30% there in person. So the numbers are way lower at meeting attendance. People are way more apathetic with what is going on with the organization, people are just kind of going through the motions, it looks like, except for those with, I guess they call them privileges or, the authority, ministerial servants, elders, all that stuff. They're just scrambling constantly trying to keep things afloat. There's the Call Bethel podcast that's going up. There's Keep Sweet and Pray, which is that show on Netflix. I haven't had a chance to see it, but there's a bunch of people that have been likening it to witnesses and what they do, and that's not even directly about them. Then you have that Pimo Bethelite that came out on the subreddit like a week or so ago, and they straight up said that the governing body is paranoid. Even at Bethel, people are starting to get more apathetic towards it. So they're kind of undeniably at another crossroads. And, of course, I wasn't alive at that time, but I imagine it was the same with the previous Armageddon predictions and everything. It's kind of getting really bad for them. And they have to have an answer, or they have to take some sort of action, I feel. We saw the morning worship that recently came out. Well, I don't know if you've seen it, but it did come out recently, and it had a vague alluding to attacks on witnesses, but they didn't specify what it was. Um, so the answer can't just keep being morning worships and watchtowers. I mean, it can, but they're just going to keep bleeding people. So I'm wondering again, what is your opinion on this? Do you think they're going to double down, become more dogmatic with things, and just hold on to the very indoctrinated people they have? Do you think that there may be an ease uh, of their rulings, like the disfellowshipping arrangement, all that stuff? Do you think that there may be another more extreme solution, like appointing the helpers to the governing body? I know you can't see, but I did quotations there. The helpers to the governing body there. Do you think they may just make them the new governing body and then just dip and then let the younger ones deal with the fallout? Um, so I guess that's it's in so many words my question. This voicemail was a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. But again, thank you for everything you do. And if you do use this one, great. I really do want you to use this. But thank you again for everything you do. And I appreciate any insight or any thoughts you have on this. I know a lot of people that are PMO or kind of it feels like a nervous excitement with the way things are going, and we're excited for what comes next, man.
Thank you for that message. Wow. And you've been very, very flattering with your praise. So thank you for those really lovely words about the channel. I guess what you're asking me is, what's the end game? What's the long-term strategy of the organization? How are they going to deal with, as you put it, the crossroads? I am trying to temper my excitement. I know you sound very excited, and probably justifiably so, because you are a ministerial servant. So for those of you who don't know all of the different acronyms, it's PMO, physically in, mentally out, and MS is ministerial servant. So you are someone who is on the ground, seeing an organization in crisis, seeing an organization that's flapping around, trying to keep afloat, trying to keep some semblance of normalcy, even though the meetings are underattended, as is clearly evident from the fact that they sent out that announcement to all congregations and had it read over 2 meetings, essentially ordering witnesses back to the kingdom halls and telling them not to use the Zoom meetings or the Zoom option of attending meetings unless they really need to. So I would agree. I think that there is a unique situation going on right now, and I think that unmistakably the coronavirus pandemic has accelerated probably the inevitable. It's, I wouldn't say upended, but it's had a very dramatic impact on probably a lot of religious groups, but it's had a pronounced impact on Jehovah's Witnesses, so that, you know, the normal kind of routine of worship has been completely interrupted for a long period of time. And during that time, people have started to think outside the box. People have started to maybe question their beliefs, or at least in some way distance themselves from the organization, or begin to distance themselves. And that's having a noticeable effect on Kingdom Hall attendance. I just try to temper my excitement because I've been doing this now for quite some time. I started my activism over 10 years ago. I started waking up about 12 years ago. And I've had lots of periods during those 10 years, 10, 12 years, where I've thought, this organization's about to go bankrupt, you know? It's going to happen really, really soon. They're making all the noises you would expect to hear from an organization that is on the brink of collapse. And they're still here in 2022. They're still at it, you know? So as tempting as it is for me to jump up and down and say, hey, we've got them, you know? They're like a caged animal at this point, and we've got them exactly where we want them, and the end is nigh. I guess now that I'm a bit longer in the tooth, I try to temper my excitement. As I said before, this is an organization that doesn't know when to die. You know, it's like the classic kind of Bond villain scene. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. You know, it's which is kind of a messed up analogy, because that's putting the organization as Bond. But they are defying expectations, is what I'm saying. And I think that verse in, is it Proverbs? Expectation postponed is making the heart sick. I think that it's possible to get even more depressed and even more traumatized by this organization if you develop this expectation that it's on the brink of collapse, and year after year after year it's still going in some form. All of that said, what do I think is the end game? What do I think is going to happen with this organization? Ultimately, it's going to be minimum a shadow of its former glories. I think its zenith, its pinnacle was reached in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we're already well along in the downward slide since then. If you think in terms of the number of branches that have closed, the actual global footprint in terms of branches and real estate and that kind of thing, we're already on the downwards slope. I like to think that future generations just will not tolerate cults like Jehovah's Witnesses. I like to think that cults like Jehovah's Witnesses are ultimately not viable in the information age, where people can scrutinize, where people can be skeptical, where people can do objective research. I like to think that there will be a time where, even though individuals identify as Jehovah's Witnesses, there isn't really an organization to lead them anymore. There isn't really anything approaching what we see now, or certainly what we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s. Exactly what that will look like, I don't know. I can see an intermediate period where the organization makes drastic changes in efforts to keep the authority of the governing body intact and keep some control over Jehovah's Witnesses, even though they simply don't have the money to have the global empire that they once enjoyed. So I think it's almost inevitable that at some point they're going to sell the kingdom halls, or most of the kingdom halls. I think they're going to switch to, or it wouldn't surprise me if they switch to a model whereby people do still meet in person, but in the form of conventions and assemblies, which they might actually increase the number of to compensate. So let's say, once a month or once every 2 or 3 months, you have something to go to, some kind of convention or assembly at a centralized kind of city location, a little bit like the ideal orgs, the Scientology centers. They'll have like one center for a large kind of area, rather than all of these kingdom halls dotted around. I think it makes sense for them to do that eventually. And yeah, that's the kind of halfway point to, I guess, oblivion. In terms of whether we can expect them to double down, get worse, get better, get more moderate, get more doomsday, it's really not looking good, to be honest. I recently did a video, thumbnail here, if Tibor is gracious, discussing who is the most powerful governing body member. And I pointed out that my thinking on this changed very quickly after I interviewed Daniel Graves, who is a defected member of the Wallkill Bethel family. He was on the Hospital Information Services desk. And he told me that, at least in his opinion, Mark Sanderson is running the show. He's the one that seems to be steering the governing body in what he said is a specific direction. And if we're going to look at Mark Sanderson and his track record and his psychology, I guess we'd say he's the last person we'd want to be steering the ship, because he's young, he's got years ahead of him, he has demonstrated an appetite for perpetuating the more disgusting policies and the more disgusting teachings that this organization has. I recently did a video on his talk for the Hospital Liaison Committee elders. Thumbnail here, if Tibor is gracious. This man is happy to see babies dying over the blood issue. That's how fanatical he is. That's the sort of man we're dealing with. He worked for a number of years on hospital information services before being appointed to the governing body. So the blood teaching is his baby. It's kind of his thing, his specialty. Even though he likes to come across as sort of the Bible scholar of the governing body, as the one who knows all the, ancient editions of the Bible or whatever. He likes people to think that he's like the Bible scholar, but in my opinion, he's the blood man. He's the one who really, really wants to keep the blood teaching, and he wants to see Jehovah's Witnesses continue to martyr themselves on this. So from that point of view, if he's the one who's steering the ship, it's just not looking good, is it? So quite what's going to happen in the months or years ahead, I have no idea. I've sort of made predictions in the past that haven't come out or haven't worked out the way I thought. I really, really thought at one point that we were months away from the organisation declaring bankruptcy, because, as I argued at the time, if you can borrow money, then you can go bankrupt. And this is an organisation that we know borrows money. They keep defying my expectations. They are like some kind of weird zombie group that's still moving, and like the roadkill that's still twitching, hours after it's been run over. They just keep going, and I think that for that reason we need to balance our expectations. As exciting as it is to see clear evidence that they are regressing, that they are in retreat, long may that continue, and let's celebrate each and every clear example of their continuing downsizing and continuing shrinking. Maybe you'll remember me celebrating in 2020 when we had the first reduction in publishers in, I think, 42 years. Let's celebrate those victories, because they are victories. And let's cheer them as they slowly go down in flames like a slow motion Hindenburg. But I'm here to tell you that they're still going to be ruining lives for years, if not decades. I'm afraid to say that's what it's looking like. And even long after the organisation is either bankrupt or a shadow of its former glories, there'll still be a huge body count and a huge pile of shattered lives, a huge pile of misery due to what it's doing and what it's teaching right now. So I sympathise with your situation, by the way, as a ministerial servant, PMO. I'm sure you have a plan in place as to how you're going to navigate your current situation, and because you sound like you have your head screwed on. So best of luck with your exit plan and with forging the best life that you can, which is certainly not a life in this failing, abusive, toxic group. So thank you so much indeed for your message. Thank you for calling in. If you would like to call in with a voicemail, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to broadcast your message. But that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching.